I'm Stuart Hameroff, Director of the Center for Consciousness Studies, and one of the organizers of the Toward Science of Consciousness Conference. Welcome to a special pre-conference workshop this evening. I'll introduce our speaker in a moment. I think you all know who he is. But let me just say first that we had a session in here all day today, a forum on Eastern philosophy and consciousness in conjunction with Dialbag Educational Institute in Agra, India. And many of the people from DEI are here, and a number also are watching live on TV in Agra. They're 12 and a half hours ahead of us, so it's morning there, I guess. And so welcome to those of you in India also. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Deepak Chopra. Deepak, whom I'm very pleased and proud to say has become a good friend of mine and trusted colleague in the last several years since we've known each other. He is by training an endocrinologist, a physician, a member of a fellow of the American College of Physicians. He's also, as you probably know, a noted author, having written 65 books, including 20 New York Times bestsellers. He has a number of other roles. He is a senior fellow for the Gallup organization, the polling organization, which takes the pulse of the country and the world, you might say. He organizes the Sages and Scientists Conference in Carlsbad, California every year, which brings together people of the Eastern spiritual, not just Eastern, but spiritual, mystical approaches, together with cutting-edge science in areas of biology, brain science, cosmology, astronomy, and so forth. It's a wonderful conference. He is the founder and CEO of the Chopra Foundation. Deepak is not a name dropper, but if he were a name dropper, he'd be the world's best name dropper. I have to say, for example, a couple months ago, I got an email saying that checking the dates for his appearance here because he had been invited to speak at the White House by President Obama. And to make a long story short, he wound up canceling that in order to be here with us tonight. And but I'm happy to report also that he got to meet President Obama in the interim and knows him. Anyway, he knows everybody, actually. He just knows everybody in the world, and you've seen him on TV, I'm sure, and he's a good friend. And once you know him, you understand why. You can talk. He's very down to earth, despite having this tremendous, overreaching view of the world. He is a force for good in the world, a force of nature, really. He's really trying to do things to help humanity, the world, and everything. So, without further ado, please give a great round of applause to Deepak Chopra.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks for coming this evening. Stuart and I have become great friends, and we've met through our friendship, collaborated with some really interesting people. Menas is here. Where are you, Menas? Quantum physicist, so if I get into trouble, I can ask him the right questions. Rudy Tanzi from Harvard, who's a neuroscientist, actually, and also the director of genetics over there, who's talking about consciousness-driven mutations. So there's lots of very interesting collaborations coming. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the neuroscience of enlightenment, and therefore I presume that you all believe that there is such a state called enlightenment. And I want to show you what I think are the neural correlates. Tomorrow we have a conversation with Leonard Mlodinow, who's the co-author of our last book together, which was War of the Worldviews, and with Sue Blackmore, who's here as well. So I'll not talk too much about science tonight. I'll talk about the Vedic perspective on consciousness. And this morning I spent the whole morning listening to the Dialbag group, and I want to acknowledge their presence here and thank them for actually bringing me back to some very fond memories. I spent 15 years of my life also serving a master, a guru, in an ashram, and exploring consciousness in the lab that you need to explore consciousness in, which is consciousness itself. Okay, so I really enjoyed this morning's presentations, and especially the opening remarks of Professor Satsangi, Reverend Professor Satsangi, and I know he's there in India, where it is morning, watching us, and so I want to acknowledge his presence and thank him for actually exploring the very, very rich exploration of consciousness that is part of the Vedic tradition of India and goes back 5,000 years ago. 5,000. This morning, you heard mention of rishis, munis, sages, saints. So I want to start with a story of a great seer known as Vasishtha. And I'm sure the Dayalbagh scientists and sages know all about Vasishtha, but in the Indian mythology, Vasishtha is one of the 7 great seers of antiquity. We don't know when he lived, but he lived a long time ago. And if you go to Rishikesh, Rishikesh is the Valley of the Saints, the foothills of the Himalayas, you will see between Rishikesh and Haridwar, there's something called Vasishtha's cave. And it's a little hole on the face of a mountain that leads into a cave. And mythology, legend, history, whatever, holds that this is the cave where Vasishtha spent several decades in silent meditation. And in Indian mythology, when you see the Great Dipper, the 7 stars, so one of them is named after Vasishtha, the other are other rishis. So he's kind of big deal in the Vedic tradition. And the story is that Ram, who's the incarnation in the Hindu mythology, Ram is the incarnation of Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, who maintains the universe. So he's the incarnation of God. And Ram is sent by his father. He's born to a princely family. And Ram is sent by his father to Vasishtha to learn about consciousness. And this story has been passed on for generations. So of course, when Ram meets the great sage, as is the Indian custom, he falls to the ground, he touches the feet of the great guru, and Vasishtha says, "Hey, stop it, what are you doing? You're God, you're not supposed to do that." And Ram says, "I might be God, but I've forgotten. So I have come to you, so you can help me remember." And that teaching is one of the great teachings of Vedanta. It's called the Yoga of Vasishtha. And I had the good fortune to translate some of it in English. It's not published yet. But some of what I'm going to say to you comes from the teachings of Vasishtha, one of the greatest seers of all time. And everything that you hear in these conferences about multiverses, about the space-time continuum, about force fields, all of that is mentioned in the Yoga Vasishtha, not in the language of physics, but in the language of consciousness. So here's the fundamental premise of what I'm going to say today, and I'm very careful by saying the fundamental premise, okay? And this is the premise on which all of Vedic knowledge is based. And that is that the most fundamental fact of existence is not the existence of the universe, but the awareness that the universe exists. Because if there was no awareness that the universe exists, then for all practical purposes, it wouldn't exist. So that's the first, most fundamental premise, that the fundamental fact of existence is the awareness of existence. The most fundamental fact of existence is the awareness of existence, and the awareness of the existence that there is something to be aware of. And this awareness is the ground of being. It's the ground of existence, because without it, there would be no cognition, there would be no perception, there would be no experience, there would be no relationships, no social interactions, and no environment to speak of. It is this fundamental ground of being that differentiates into all these different aspects of existence. Furthermore, Vedanta maintains that there is no objective way to experience consciousness, because consciousness is an experience. It's not a methodological validation inferentially. When you look at the brain, you're looking at neural signatures of consciousness. But we do not experience neural signatures of consciousness. We experience life as sound and touch and sight and taste and smell and thoughts and feelings and emotions and desires and instincts and intuition and creativity and imagination and choice. So consciousness cannot be studied objectively. It can only be understood through self-awareness, because it is the self, okay? And all the methodologies of Vedanta are based on the whole teaching of yoga, which has been mentioned very beautifully all this morning from our Indian teachers. But yoga has many different branches. One of the most beautiful works of yoga is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which talks about the 8 aspects of yoga: observances, evolutionary choices, which is called yama, the niyama, which is all the things that lead to entropy in consciousness. Then there's dhyan, which is meditation, dharana, which is attention, focused attention, samadhi, which is transcendence, and then there's pranayama, breathing techniques, asana, the postures, and pratyahara, going inward instead of focusing outward. Those are the 8 limbs of yoga. And furthermore, Bhagavad Gita was mentioned this morning. Bhagavad Gita, in the 18 chapters, Lord Krishna teaches Arjuna the secrets of enlightenment in basically 18 chapters through the 4 yogas. The yoga of meditation and reflection, which is, and self-awareness, which is the yoga that is called Raj Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of feeling, I would say the Qualia Yoga, for David Chalmers' sake. The yoga of Qualia, feeling, emotions, and images, and sensations, and moods, and everything that we call subjective experience, but from the level of feeling. So that's Bhakti Yoga, and it's also frequently the relationship we have to the mystery that we come from. So that's Bhakti Yoga. And then there's Jnana Yoga, the yoga of the intellect, or of understanding. I would say it's the yoga of science, really, because science is an attempt to figure out what's going on intellectually and through scientific methodologies. And then there's finally Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. Action that is evolutionary, that's part of the evolutionary impulse of the universe. And everything I'm going to say is based on this very fundamental idea that only awareness or consciousness can understand consciousness. Only consciousness can explore consciousness. Only consciousness can experience consciousness. Everything else that we know about consciousness through the usual scientific methodologies is inferential. And although this is a very ancient idea, it has found some validation in some of the scientists of our time. For example, John Wheeler says very clearly that every subatomic particle, every force of field, even the fabric of space and time, derives its meaning, its significance, its very existence from apparatus-elicited questions to yes and no answers. That even Heisenberg said, science reveals to us not nature as nature is, but as nature is when exposed to our method of questioning. So science is not a method to find the ultimate truth. Scientific methodologies are based on empirical observations of what are called empirical facts, but Vedanta would hold what we call empirical facts are actually modes of human cognition, modes of human perception, and modes of human questioning that are asked through a human nervous system. That therefore, everything that we call perceptual experience is species-specific, first of all. It's species-specific, and everything that we call reality is, in fact, an experience in consciousness of basically qualia. Everything that we call reality is a subjective experience of qualities of awareness within awareness. So right now, I have the experience that I exist. There's someone here, but if you go inside my body with a PET scan or a CAT scan, you won't find me there. So, while scientists criticize the out-of-body experience, most scientists cannot explain the in-body experience, because how do you get the experience of being in here when you're not there? So what Vedanta would say, the I feeling, the I experience, is also a qualia. It's a quality of awareness within awareness. And the feeling that I see you is also a quality of awareness within awareness, because how do I see you? I see you as form and color, and I experience you as sound and texture. These are sensations and images and feelings and thoughts in my own awareness. And that the whole universe, in fact, is a differentiation of awareness into qualities of awareness that are experienced simultaneously as the subject of experience and the object of experience. Therefore, consciousness is not the observer, nor is consciousness the observed. Consciousness is the immeasurable potential in which the observer and the observed simultaneously arise, in which, or co-arise, you might say. Not only they co-arise, but they co-subside in every moment, because consciousness, which is the ground of being, is constantly interacting with its own self and experiencing its own self as the observer, the process of observation, and that which is observed. In Vedic vocabulary, this is the Samhita, and this is for my Indian audience here. This is the Samhita, which is the togetherness of Rishi, Devata, and Chandas. Rishi is the seer. Devata is the process of seeing, which is the divine consciousness experiencing itself, and Chandas is that which is observed. But consciousness is the self-interaction, Maharishi used to say, that experiences itself simultaneously as all these observers. And observers are not just human beings. You have mosquitoes and butterflies and honeybees and whales and dolphins and birds with completely different nervous systems and different experiences of the one reality, which is consciousness. The observed, so reality is not fixed. It's completely flexible, and there are multiple realities even right now. They are species-specific, they are culture-specific, they are even individual-specific, because we all are conditioned from the moment of birth into certain ways of perceiving. There is no such thing as the look of the world. There is only a way of looking at the world, and there are many, many ways of looking at the world. What we call physical reality, what we call physical reality is conscious agents and their perceptual experiences. And evolution, of course, does not, therefore, give us any clue. The mechanisms of evolution are not to give us a clue to the meaning of truth, because evolution dictates survival. And so our perceptual apparatus is built to propagate the species and ensure our survival, this perceptual apparatus. And this perceptual apparatus is very limited. You know, the range of human experience is very limited. And of course, then there is the hard problem in consciousness, always, which I think is not the hard problem, it's the impossible problem, because we're asking the wrong question. The hard problem is based on a metaphysical presumption on which our science is based. And that is that the material world is real, that the material world is all that exists, when in fact, if you could look at it from a completely different perspective, which is what we call the material world is conscious agents and their perceptual experiences, and the experiences are all qualia. Their experiences are all qualia. So that's why we have this problem. Okay, perhaps we are asking the wrong question. Instead of asking ourselves, how is consciousness created through biological mechanisms, perhaps we should be asking ourselves, how does consciousness conceive, construct, govern, and become the universe, including the brain, the body, and the physical universe? How does consciousness differentiate into mind, into brain, into body, and the universe? Just turn it upside down. And that's what we heard all morning, by the way. That was what we were listening, and the very rich heritage of knowledge from the Vedanta, which says this is knowledge not that you gain, this is knowledge you have to become. So because I'm speaking of the neuroscience of enlightenment, let me say to you some of the other basic premises of the paradigm that I'm exploring with you. The first is that knowledge is different in different states of consciousness. I'll repeat, knowledge is different in different states of consciousness. Number two, perception is different in different states of consciousness. Number three, cognition is different in different states of consciousness. And number four, biology is different in different states of consciousness. And therefore, reality is different in different states of consciousness. In all of Western scientific literature, you only hear about three states of consciousness. So the first state of consciousness is deep sleep. And I think you'll agree that deep sleep has its own biological parameters. You know, the brain, you see delta waves. The brain's activity is very little to do with experience. You have hardly no experience in deep sleep. And then the second state of consciousness that Vedanta identifies is the dream state, where you have different perceptual experiences, and your brain biology is different in second state of consciousness. And you know, in your dream, you feel that you are the subject of experience, and all the other characters, which are qualia within your awareness, are different people, but they are actually generated in your own consciousness. You, the subject of experience, and all the other characters in the dream are generated within consciousness as subject and object. So that's the second state of consciousness. The third state of consciousness is called waking state of consciousness, which presumably, I hope, all of you are at least in at the moment. And this waking state of consciousness is where we experience the world through the five senses. And here again, I am the subject, and you are the object. And for you, I am the object, and you are the subject. But we are experiencing a subject of awareness and several objects of awareness. But Vedanta holds these are all created within consciousness, both the subject and the object. That if you were to wake up from the waking state, which is another kind of a dream, that you would recognize that this experience is valid only for the waking state, just like the dream experience was valid only for the dream state. And the sleeping experience was valid only for the sleeping state. So what are the other states of consciousness? Here we heard a lot about the states of consciousness this morning. The vocabulary has existed for a long time. And I'm going to simplify it a little bit because what we heard this morning was very rich and comes from a great theoretical framework that understands consciousness subjectively. But I'll explain to you the remaining states in a very simplified map. So there's deep sleep, there's dreaming, there's waking, and then there's the fourth state of consciousness, which in Sanskrit is called Turiya, which is transcendent consciousness or transcendental consciousness. But for simplicity, I'll call it soul consciousness today. Okay? It's the consciousness of the observer, actually, in many ways. So right now, as you're listening to me, try this. As you're listening to me, just turn your attention to who's listening. So as you're listening, be aware of the listener. And if you feel a still presence or awareness, that's you. That's the I feeling. Okay? It's not your mind, which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before the lecture started. The mind is a conversation that occurs in the presence of being. And that presence was there when you were a baby. It hasn't shifted. It was there when you were a teenager. Different mind, different personality, different body, different experience of the world, but that ground of experience was there. Okay, so that's the fourth state of consciousness, and you can study that. You can study neural correlates in people who transcend. Transcend means they go beyond the subject-object split. See, science is based on the subject-object split, which is artificial. The subject-object split is artificial. Nature is a single wholeness. Even the whole universe is a single activity. So science is based on the subject-object split, which says we divide it, and we say that's the world, and therefore science is incomplete. It's not a method for exploring the truth, but a particular modality of observation. What we call empirical facts are modes of human experience, modes of human perception, even things like subatomic particles. In fact, Hans-Peter Duer, who was a former director of the Max Planck Institute, doesn't use the word subatomic particles. He calls them HAPs. HAPs, short for happenings, or HAPs are space-time events in consciousness. Okay. Science is an activity in consciousness. It's based on observation. Observations are made in consciousness. It's based on theories. Theories are conceived in consciousness. It's based on observations, theory, and experiment, which are designed in consciousness. So science is the offspring of consciousness, and it depends on consciousness to deliver all the goods. Okay, having said that now, what I'd like to say is that the remaining states of consciousness are called soul consciousness, cosmic consciousness, and I'll explain these to you in a few moments because we're going to talk about the neuroscience of consciousness. So there's soul consciousness, cosmic consciousness, divine consciousness or refined cosmic consciousness, and unity consciousness or enlightenment. 7 states, okay, in the roadmap. Again, I'll repeat that. Deep sleep, dreams, waking, soul consciousness, or you might say just observer consciousness or transcendent consciousness, cosmic consciousness, which I'll explain in a little while, divine consciousness. If you don't like the word divine because it sounds too religious, you can call it refined cosmic consciousness. It's kind of less, is more secular anyway. And then the last stage is called unity consciousness or enlightenment. Okay, now many people these days, Buddhism is the most kind of sexy Eastern spiritual tradition, but I'd like to tell you that Buddha's insights were all based on the Vedanta. In fact, he simplified them because the Vedanta was too abstract for a lot of people who had lost the experience. So Buddha is a later simplified version of Vedanta. Now, let's, for simplicity, because I also just wrote my book, Spiritual Solutions, this week, I try to explain these concepts in a way that might be easily understood. So before I go into the neuroscience of enlightenment, let me share with you the basis of my book, Spiritual Solutions, which will actually lay the groundwork for the neuroscience of enlightenment. So the 4 goals of life in our tradition and in the Vedic tradition, the 4 goals of life in Sanskrit are artha. You know what artha means? Our Indian friends know. It means money. Okay, it means material things. It means success and achievement. In a way, they follow the hierarchy of needs that Abraham Maslow talks about, except he extended them. So the first is material success, the earliest phase of development. The second, as our awareness expands, is relationships, or kama, which also includes pleasure, love, sex, and all sensual experience in all its forms. The third goal of life is called dharma. Dharma means higher consciousness, expanding consciousness in the direction of evolution of consciousness. And the fourth goal in Vedanta is moksha, which means freedom, literally, and freedom from conditioned consciousness. So conditioned consciousness is what we call the ego personality, which is an impermanent pattern of behavior of universal consciousness. Okay? So conditioning, of course, can be conditioning through culture, through media, through parents, through religion, through history, through mythology, all these condition consciousness and localize it. And so the ultimate goal of life is to go beyond all conditioning. Okay? And that's freedom, to find consciousness as the immeasurable potential of all that was, all that is, and all that will be. All observers, all modes of observation, and all objects of observation. These are the 4 goals of life, which I translated for my Western audiences as success, health and well-being, because health and well-being depends on what we call homeostasis, or self-repair mechanisms, which in our worldview are generated in consciousness. And then the third I translated as relationships, and the fourth I translated as personal growth. They're not identical to the Sanskrit, but come close enough. So here's some of the basic fundamental solutions. They're based on the idea that everything in the universe is a spontaneous evolution of consciousness. From a cell to a tree, an ecosystem, they all exist as differentiated aspects of awareness. And that we, you and I, are luminous stardust beings in self-awareness. This is Vasishtha's teaching. So before I came in, I asked Menas, who's a computational theoretical quantum physicist and has become a very good friend. I said, tell me what the universe is made up of right now as we know it through science. So 70% is dark energy, which is which is separating the galaxies at the cosmic horizon faster than the speed of light, and we have no idea what it is. 25% of the universe is dark matter. No idea what it is. I mean, there are lots of theories. We call it matter because it has gravity. It bends space-time. We have no idea what it is. It's not regular atomic matter. It does not emit light. It does not absorb light. It does not reflect light. But light can go around it. But it does have the same gravitational effects as regular matter. Well, that leaves 5% of atomic matter in the universe. 5%. Of that, 4.9% is invisible because it hasn't yet formed into stars. So what you see as the visible universe, with billions of galaxies, and now we are being told trillions of planetary systems, billions of galaxies, and trillions of planetary systems, with all these stars, that is 0.1% of what actually exists out there. And that includes you and me, by the way, because the elements that make your body were born in those stars, the carbon and the hydrogen, and the oxygen, the nitrogen, all the other elements of the periodic table, but mostly carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, that was forged in the crucible of stars. Your body is circulating stardust, and it's recycling furthermore, and it's self-aware. It has cognition and perception and experience. So when I say we are luminous stardust beings in self-awareness, which is what Vasishtha said thousands of years ago, is actually what scientists are saying to us. Furthermore, we are an activity of the universe. We are an activity. This is a very important thing to recognize, that there are no nouns in the universe. There are only verbs. And actually, it's a single verb. The universe is one activity. You and I, at this moment, are an activity of that dark energy, whatever it is, that dark matter, and that luminous stardust, which is recycling right here in this physical body. And that includes our perceptions and our subjective experiences. They are an activity of the universe. Don't take it personally. Okay, because when we understand this totally, this is the goal of enlightenment, to get rid of the person that never was. So, and you know, when I went to medical school, the first lesson you learn is anatomy. And that's a terrible thing, because you come away with a worldview that believes of the human body as a structure, when in fact it's a process. Okay? In fact, there are no structures. There are no nouns. Nouns are a convention of language, not descriptions of reality. Your physical body recycles once a year. So the molecules of your body, the atoms of your body, they recycle once a year, and this is known through, we know this through radioactive isotope studies. Your stomach lining is new every 5 days. The one you have today wasn't there 5 days ago. Your skin recycles, the molecules that make up your skin recycle once a month. Your skeleton recycles once every 3 months. So it seems so hard and solid, but it's carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and phosphorus and calcium, which is recycling every 3 months. Your DNA, which holds the memories of millions of years of evolution, the actual raw material of the DNA comes and goes every 6 weeks like migratory birds. I've been having these amazing conversations with Rudy Tanzi, who's the director of genetics at Harvard Medical School, discovered 3 of the 4 genes for Alzheimer's, and 100 other genes, by the way. And so he assures me that 65% of your DNA and your genes are identical to a banana. 80% the same as a mouse. 98 point something percent the same as a primate, a chimpanzee. And here we are talking about dark matter and dark energy and stardust. We have the same biological tree of evolution, the same information that gave rise to this physical body, with little leaps of radical mutations, never mind how they occurred, natural selection and random mutations, or perhaps not so random, but that's another conversation. Your physical body recycles about 98 point something percent of it once a year. This body that I'm using right now to manufacture this lecture is my year 2012 model. The physical body I brought with me to Tucson, Arizona, last time I came here. And incidentally, I came to Tucson with the same suitcase, but not the same body, because my suitcase has a longer shelf life. So are we just this recycling body? And if you think you are your body, then which one are you talking about? That's a serious dilemma then. Okay, you've had the body of an infant, you've had the body of a teenager, you have this one now, and soon this one will disappear, because we're recycling the same stuff. In fact, there are some very interesting mathematical calculations that suggest that right this moment you have in your body 1 million atoms that were once in the body of Christ, or Buddha, or Genghis Khan, or Saddam Hussein, or anyone you want to think about. In just the last 3 weeks, a quadrillion atoms, quadrillion means 10 followed by 15 zeros, have gone through your body that have gone through the body of every other living species on this planet. So think of a tree in Africa, think of a peasant in China, think of a squirrel in Siberia, and you have luminous stardust luminous stardust in your body that was circulating there only 3 weeks ago. So the first thing Vedanta says, that the body is just a recycling of stardust. It's a recycling of the universe, actually. So you say, okay, what about the mind? And when we come to the mind, there are certain problems, because in science, there is no really good definition of mind. Okay, in Vedanta, of course, the mind is a disturbance in consciousness, right? It's the phrase, there are two phrases that came to mind this morning as I was listening to our dear colleagues from Dayal, and one was Yatha Pede, Tatha Brahmande, which is, as is the universe, so is the atom. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body, stardust. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. Now, so Vedanta has no problems, the mind, but in science there is no good definition of mind. That's why we have all these arguments about hard problem and soft problem or whatever, the easy problem. So here is a very good definition that fits in very well with a Vedantic perspective. And this definition I owe to Dr. Daniel Siegel, who is a psychotherapist and MD, originally from Boston, where I trained as well, but now practices in UCLA. And he's a Buddhist scholar as well. So this is how he defines mind. And I like this definition. Perhaps Sue might object to this definition, but I have not found many objections to this definition. So here it goes. The mind is an embodied and relational process. I'll repeat that. The mind is an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Once again, I'll repeat it. The mind is an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. So right now, our minds are, in a sense, entangled relationally. I am speaking to you. I'm exchanging information with you. Or at this moment, I'm giving information. And you're, to some extent, giving me back information through your body language, through your eye movements, through your facial expressions, through your gestures, through your posture. You're also giving me information. So we are exchanging information. And this information is instantly modulating the activity of genes in your neurons. Okay, because this information, as we are speaking right now, I'm now giving you information which you have to metabolize through your cerebral cortex, okay, not through your midbrain or not through your emotional brain, but through your reflective brain. And so the information I'm giving you is instantly causing the activity, instantly, within seconds. I checked with Rudy Tanzi this morning, okay? He said there are two kinds of gene modulation that occur through thought and through mind. One is instant, and that involves messenger RNA, and one is called long-term potentiation, which is habits, okay? But in order to lay down neural tracks, you have to instantly activate genes. So right now, I'm activating your genes, and through your feedback, you're activating my genes. And then, because now the relationships are spaced into India, everybody is participating in this exchange of energy and information, or we can say the experience of meaning, okay? And we are modulating neural networks, we are activating genes, and these are neural signatures of mind. And these neural signatures are also affecting the body, because we now know that your breathing, your metabolism, your hormones, your self-regulatory mechanisms, your perception of the world, your beliefs, your assumptions, they're all influenced through this relational and embodied process. The mind is not in the brain. It's everywhere. In your brain, in my brain, in our bodies, and right now through social networks across the planet. In fact, unbeknownst to us, through social networks, we are creating a global brain for a planetary civilization. Unbeknownst to us, this process is going to get rid of our localized identities, whether they are the identity of a particular race or a particular religion or a nationality. You know, we are slowly moving into cosmic citizens, and technology is the extension of the evolutionary impulse of the cosmos that is acting not only through the human brain, but through the technology that is the extension of our senses that is created by our consciousness. Okay, so it's embodied, it's relational, and it can't be localized. The mind cannot be localized. And the mind is where we process meaning. And that's why I have a problem with material scientists, because the physical systems do not process meaning. There is no theory that says, how does a physical system process meaning? So let's say somebody says to you, I love you, and you're madly in love with them. Immediately, your genes will go into activity in your brain networks, and you'll secrete serotonin, opiates, oxytocin, and dopamine. And by the way, they all regulate they're immunomodulators, they regulate your immune system, and you'll feel intoxicated with the experience, just that one sentence, I love you. Now somebody else says, or the same person says, I love you, and you're considering divorcing them. You're not going to secrete serotonin or oxytocin. You're going to secrete adrenaline and cortisol, which is going to immediately put your immune system into depression, and all kinds of nasty things will happen in your biology. It's the same sentence. It's the same vibration of the atmosphere. It's the same electrical current that goes to your brain. And yet you have a completely different output because you have processed meaning in consciousness, not in your neural networks, which are the output of consciousness. I hope I'm making sense, but nevertheless, this is the paradigm. Okay, so we now have a definition for mind. The mind is process, and it cannot be separated from the body, because every aspect of this process has implications in this recycled stuff, stardust, that we are made of. Your brain networks, your body networks, your perceptions, your assumptions, everything changes as you process meaning. Okay, and there's no separation here between mind and body. So I'm not talking dualism, please. Okay, this is totally monistic. The body is the objective experience of the world. The mind is the subjective. The body is the objective experience of consciousness, and the mind is the subjective experience of consciousness. So it's not dualistic at all. It's the same thing, perceived differently. Okay, now we come to the big question. If we've gone beyond these two processes, what's consciousness? What's the soul? In fact, is there such a thing? With most people, you won't have a problem convincing them of their mind. Their internal dialogue never shuts up. In fact, that's the first thing that people complain of when they start doing meditation. I have too many thoughts. Okay, and it's great that they say that, because it's the first time that they, in a way, are suggesting that they are not their thoughts. I have too many thoughts. Who's asking that question? Okay, Rumi, the great Sufi poet, has a beautiful poem. He says, "Who am I in the middle of all this thought traffic?" Okay, so consciousness is the ground of being in which sensations, images, thoughts, and feelings arise as a disturbance, and then they subside back into it. In Vedanta, the universal consciousness is called Brahman, and the whole universe is called Brahmand. Okay, because Brahmand, the universe, is a disturbance in Brahman's bliss. Brahman, the state of bliss consciousness, in total equanimity and love and bliss existence, it interacts with its own self, it disturbs itself, and it then differentiates into the observer process of observation and that which is observed, and that is called Brahmand, the whole universe of experience within consciousness. So there's another very important Vedic aphorism: I'm not in the world is in me. Where do you experience the world? Where are you experiencing me now? In your consciousness. So I'm not in the world is in me. I'm not in the body is in me. I'm not in the mind is in me. The body, the mind, and the world, they happen to me as I curve back within myself and I create again and again. This is Lord Krishna's teaching to Arjuna on the battlefield of life. Prakratim swam vashtbhai vishrajami puna puna. Prakratim swam vashtbhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create the mind, I create the body, and I create the whole universe. So, the great Indian thinker, J. Krishnamurti, was a great friend of David Bohm. I see there are Bohm philosophers here, and great privilege to meet them. I had the great privilege to meet Mrs. Bohm. But I think I recall a conversation where Bohm asked Krishnamurti, he said, the more I listen to you, the more I realize you must be an atheist. And Krishnamurti kind of thought for a bit, and he said, I used to be an atheist till I realized I was God. And Rumi has a beautiful poem too, where he says, you think you're a drop in the ocean, but why not think of yourself as the ocean in the drop? Just a shift in perspective. Okay? And that shift in perspective is the 7 steps to the evolution of consciousness that I'm going to explain. Okay. So for practical purposes, what I did in this particular set of slides, to make it simple, was I'm going to skip some of this, okay? But this slide basically shows that there is no fixed identity, and I don't even know if it's there. It's a movie that's embedded in the slide presentation, and I don't think it's here. So let's go. The basic presumption in the understanding of the evolution of consciousness is that all our challenges in life exist to make us more aware of our inner purpose. And the inner purpose is to become aware that the universe is becoming aware through us. The human nervous system is that privileged activity of the universe through which it is finding its own awareness. A larger purpose is trying to unfold through you, and this is the seed of consciousness that appears to, through random events, be creating a process, but that process is driven through purpose. And so these, for practical simplicity, I've divided awareness as contracted when you feel separate. The observer-observed split, okay? When you see separate through an ego identity, that's the first level. And it has these signatures. When you're stressed, basically, you feel disconnected, you feel your desires are thwarted, you hold your breath, you're resentful, you're fearful, and you feel energy depletion and whatever else is there. Okay, this is contracted awareness, the feeling of being separate, not being part of the larger process, if you will. The second stage of awareness is expanded awareness. Now, your body language reflects that. It's the experience maybe falling in love or having the experience with nature where you feel that you are one with the process of nature, or at least you're connected to it, and your body relaxes. So there's a biological correlate to it. And the Sufis have a good kind of image for this. They say in contracted awareness, you're like you're a person with a candle stumbling through a dark room, and there's all kinds of furniture and all kinds of things there, and you're stumbling, and everything is a problem. And then you have expanded awareness. Maybe you have a flashlight now, and it's the light of awareness that has expanded your awareness. Now you actually see the furniture, and you see there's purpose to all these little things. There's this couch, you can lie down. There's this television set, you can switch it on and watch your favorite program. There is a stereophonic system, and you have now everything that was an obstacle, you're seeing it in the context of purpose. Expanded awareness, and then there is the third awareness, which is pure awareness. Third level, pure awareness, which is, okay, I'll show you, this is a Buddhist kind of slide, that there is awareness, which is the hub of the wheel. Again, this is courtesy of Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's a great friend and really good scientist. And he says, imagine that the hub of the wheel is awareness, and then the rim of the wheel is all the things that we can be aware of. So we can be aware of sensory experience, sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell, the qualia in our own awareness. We can be aware of our body, the musculoskeletal system and the viscera, which are very interesting techniques. And since we have 3 hours tonight, I hope to take you through some of these experiences. We can have experience of mental space, which is our own thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, images, and then we can have awareness of relationship, family, friends, social, community, world, universe. So as we expand our awareness, we become more aware of these things to be aware of. But in order to be aware of these aspects of awareness, which are forms of awareness within awareness, there has to be a hub from where the awareness is aware of itself. Okay, so I'll come back to this slide as a meditation experience, but this is level 3. Level 3 is the outer world reflects inner world, they simultaneously co-arise. There is no connection, there is unity. Okay, this is the non-local experience of your own being. Non-local body as well, because at the most subtle level, your body is stardust and light. And it's one process. And at this level, you have intuition, insight, peace, love, compassion, inspiration, equanimity, and what the Buddha calls divine qualities. Loving kindness, compassion, joy. Not happiness, joy, and equanimity. Satchitananda. Okay, level 3. Again, this is a short video that we're not going to show right now. Awareness has components. So in every state of awareness, there has many components, but I just chose 5. Perceptions, expectations, feelings, assumptions, and beliefs. So when you shift your awareness, all these components shift, and you bring your awareness to whatever situation you encounter. Okay, so let's say you are evaluating your state of awareness. These are the questions you would be asking. First of all, you would ask yourself, am I aware? Secondly, you would ask yourself, what am I aware of? But then you could go further. How am I perceiving? What are my expectations? Am I questioning my assumptions? How am I feeling? What are my beliefs? And as you shift in awareness, these things will shift. Now, it turns out a baby can read awareness. An infant can read awareness. And this we now know is through a phenomenon called limbic resonance. So limbic resonance, the limbic brain controls, or not controls, is the neural signature of emotions. I have to be careful in my language. Is the neural signature of emotions, and emotions are read through body language. A baby will look at its mother and see her facial expression, her eye movements, tone of voice, body language, posture, and gestures, and will know immediately if the mother is in contracted awareness. If she's upset and stressed, the baby will respond through mirror neurons with the same body language. And if the mother is relaxed and open and has expanded awareness, the baby will correspondingly respond. If the baby's mother is in pure awareness, in enlightenment, then the baby will see his or her mother as an extension of its own self. Evaluate your level of awareness right now. You feel restful and alert. Your mind is restful and alert, and your body is joyfully energetic. And in the third level, mind is dominated by love, compassion, joy, kindness, equanimity, because there's no separate self. The recognition that the separate self doesn't exist, and you experience your light body, the body of what in Vedanta we call the subtle body. So in Vedanta, you know, there's the physical bodies, which is the matter and energy. Okay, that's the physical body. It's called Annamaya Kosha. Then there's the subtle body, which is the mind, intellect, and ego. Okay, and that's the light body, because it's all photons, basically. And then there's the causal body, which is the non-local body in Vedanta. And your level of awareness reflects which body are you experiencing right now. In pure awareness, there's flow. Every moment is a conspiracy of the total universe. And your internal feeling is, I am the universe in motion. Brahman in action. Atman is Brahman. Okay? And of course, as you go deeper and deeper, there is less and less differentiation. It's just one single holistic process. Non-local being in a non-local universe. Very consistent with some of the things that all you guys are talking about: quantum entanglement, non-locality, timeless, spaceless domains of awareness. But here, of course, the premise is this all happening in the field of consciousness. What is spirituality? Good definition would be it's a journey into self-awareness. And it encompasses all the hierarchies, okay, from survival to safety, to material achievement, to success, to artha, to material success, moving on, then to relationships, love, compassion, creativity, insight, intuition. These are what the 7 chakras metaphorically represent. They represent the gradual evolution of consciousness in the microcosm. Okay? And ultimately, totally non-local consciousness. So 7 chakras are metaphors of consciousness as represented in biology. A domain of awareness where we experience our universality. Another definition, pure consciousness is a singular that has no plural. That's a quote from Erwin Schrödinger. Okay? So while consciousness may differentiate into many ego identities, it's still the singular consciousness. Just that there's one electricity, there's gravity, there's space-time, and there's consciousness. Okay? The self of the individual is the self of the universe, the ground state. Exploring the realms of insight, intuition, imagination, intention, inspiration, creativity, and archetypes, which represent symbolically the collective imagination and the collective experience. So these are some questions that I do with some of my course attendees to live these questions, to reflect these questions, not asking questions, but just living the questions. And once they do that, it's like any other scientific inquiry, their consciousness gives them insights. To be alive is to be in the flow of change. There is no out there. There is only in here. The out there is also in here. And life recycles and evolves at every level. Okay. Today, Stuart was talking about the recycling universe. The more you let go, the more your true self can express itself in spontaneous evolution, because holding on to anything is like holding on to your breath. You start to suffocate. It's localizing your consciousness. You need only to consciously live your true self and allow it to expand. And then in the book, I went through relationships and how relationships are affected by contracted awareness, and what happens to the same relationships in expanded awareness, and what happens to relationships in pure awareness. You know, somebody asked Nisargadatta Maharaj, who's a great teacher of Vedanta, I said, yeah, I see an old man talking to me, and you know, seems very personal to me. And don't you experience love? And Maharaj replied, my love radiates like light from a bonfire, focused on none and denied to none. It's the pure radiance of pure consciousness, Sat Chit Ananda, as we know. So I applied this to addictive behaviors, what causes contracted awareness, how does it relate to epigenetics, to neural networks, to immune systems, to homeostasis, to self-healing. Because, you know, I'm trained as a medical doctor, and it took me a long time to recognize that all disease is a disruption in homeostasis. All disease is a disruption in self-regulatory mechanisms. Okay? And consciousness is the most self-regulating thing there is. Okay? It's not only self-regulating, it's self-evolving. Right now, you have 100 trillion cells in your body, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Every cell in your body is performing over 100,000 activities, and every cell knows what the other cell is doing and is in fact, in some way, non-locally, synchronistically behaving in harmony with every cell. How does a human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, and make a baby all at once? There's no mechanistic explanation for that at the moment. Okay? And while your body does that, while your body does 100,000 activities in 100 trillion cells, it also tracks the movement of stars and planets, because your biological rhythms, circadian rhythms, seasonal rhythms, lunar rhythms, gravitational rhythms are actually the symphony of the whole cosmos. You are the cosmos in activity at this moment. All your biological rhythms are actually cosmic rhythms, circadian rhythms that shift over a 24-hour cycle, lunar rhythms, which are basically because of the gravitational effects of the sun and the moon and the stars on water, but 65% of your body is water, so it follows gravitational rhythms. There are many others that you can study. But if you understand that consciousness is self-regulating, consciousness has feedback loops, and the body follows that, then in pure awareness, consciousness is the key to addictive behavior, to getting rid of stress, to conquering the fear of death, because consciousness is non-local. Non-local doesn't exist in space-time. Okay? Space-time, where do you experience space-time? Can you see space? Where is time? I mean, we have all kinds of wonderful mathematical formulations, but mathematics is also an activity in consciousness. Okay? So Vedanta would hold that mathematical truth, which is Jyotish, by the way, mathematical truth, musical truth, which is Gandharva Veda, okay? Mathematical truth, musical truth, Platonic values, evolution, all exist as potential forms within consciousness, which is self-regulating, self-evolving, like that spiral. And so, having looked at the whole system of medicine very carefully and looked at, so as we expand our awareness, then this is what we experience in our body. I'm not going to go into this, but I want to show you this one slide, which is a map that I created through our work at Gallup. As you know, at Gallup, we gather data through doing questions. For over 100 years, Gallup has asked the most precise questions and has developed the most precise methodologies for getting the answers. I happen to be a senior scientist in Gallup, and we looked at these different aspects of well-being. Okay, so if you ask people, are you happy with what you do every day? Are you happy in your career? Only 20% of people say yes. It's an astonishing fact. Okay? I don't know if you know that more people die in our civilization on Monday morning at 9 o'clock of heart attacks than any other time. It's an extraordinary accomplishment for which only the human species can take credit. I don't think any other animal knows the difference between Monday and Tuesday. We also found that if your supervisor or the person that you work with, and this morning there was a very nice, interesting lecture on management by the Dayal group, the Dayal Bagh group, beautiful lecture, and she talked about consciousness and management. Here's some very interesting data through Gallup. If your supervisor ignores you, your rate of disengagement goes up by 45%. And sooner or later, you start getting sick because you're so stressed. If they don't ignore you, but they criticize you, you get better. Your rate of disengagement falls to 20%. Why? Because you would rather be criticized than ignored. Our consciousness is relational. If, on the other hand, your supervisor notices a single strength that you have, then your rate of disengagement goes down to less than 1%. This one statistic accounts for $380 billion of lost economy. Disengaged workers, and then another category called actively disengaged people. Actively disengaged people are not only people who are unhappy, but they come to work with the express intention of making other people unhappy. And since the mind is relational, emotions are contagious. So here's another very interesting statistic on social well-being. If you have a happy friend, your happiness score goes up by 15%. If your happy friend has a happy friend, it goes up by another 10%, even though you don't know the happy friend's happy friend. And if your happy friend's happy friend has a happy friend, it keeps going up.